You know that person at work who never complains? The one who figures things out without asking for help. The one who shows up early, gets the job done, and doesn't need anyone to clap for them. There is a good chance they grew up in the 1980s, and there is an even better chance that the decade they grew up in shaped them in ways they don't even fully understand yet. Because the 1980s was not just a time of big hair, cassette, tapes, and neon colors. It was a completely different world, a world with different rules, different dangers, different expectations. And the children who grew up in that world came out the other side with a psychology unlike any generation before or after them. Today we are breaking that down, the psychology of people who grew up in the 1980s. Why they think the way they think, why they act the way they act, and why so much of who they are today goes straight back to one specific decade. Let's start at the beginning. If you were a kid in the 1980s, here's what your life looked like. No GPS, no check ins, no way for anyone to know where you were. You came back when the streetlights came on. That was the rule, one rule, and it covered everything. Psychologists call this kind of childhood unstructured independence, and what it did to the developing brain was significant. Because when a child has to figure out their own day, their own entertainment, their own problem solving, their own conflicts with other kids, their brain builds something that modern childhoods are actually struggling to produce: self reliance. Not the kind you learn from a class or a book, the deep kind. The kind that lives in your bones. The kind that kicks in automatically when something goes wrong and there is no one around to fix it for you. 1980s kids didn't have helicopter parents. They had parents who were doing their best in a world that demanded a lot from adults. Divorce rates were climbing, both parents were working, the economy was shifting fast. So the kids learned to take care of themselves. And that lesson, that quiet, unspoken lesson, never left them. But it was not just the independence that shaped them, it was a world around them. The Cold War was still real, nuclear was not history yet, it was a genuine fear that lived in the background of everyday life. Teachers talk about it, news talked about it, movies talk about it. Kids were growing up with a low level of tension underneath everything. A sense that the world could change overnight, that stability was not guaranteed. And when children grow up that kind of environment, something happens in their psychology. They stop expecting things to be easy. They start preparing for things to go wrong, not in a panicked way, in a quiet, practical way. A way that looks a lot like, and this is the word people use for the most realistic. Let's talk about what that childhood actually produced. Because the kids who grew up in 1980s are adults now. They are in their 40s and 50s, and the patterns from that decade are still running in the background of everything they do. First, the way they handle problems. 1980s kids didn't grow up with Google. If something broken, you fixed it. If you didn't know how, you figure it out. You ask a neighbor, you read the manual, you tried things until something worked. This built a specific kind of thinking that psychologists call practical problem solving. The belief that most problems have a solution and the solution is usually found by doing, not by waiting. That's why adults who grew up in the 1980s are often the calmest person in a crisis. Not because they don't feel the pressure, but because their brain was trained from childhood to move toward a problem, not away from it. Second, the way they relate to the other people. Friendship in the 1980s were different. There were no group chats, no social media, no way to stay connected with 50 people at once. You had a small group, a tight group, the kids on your street, the people in your class, the friends you rode bikes with and got into trouble with and told your secrets to. Second, the way they relate to other people. Friendships in the 1980s were different. There were no group chats, no social media, no way to stay connected with 50 people at once. You had a small group, a tight group, the kids on your street, the people in your class, the friends you rode bikes with and got into trouble with and told your secrets to. And those relationships were real in a way that's hard to explain to someone who grew up with a phone in their hand. Because when your only option for connection is showing up in person, you show up. You learn how to work through conflict face to face. You learn how to read people without emojis. You learn how to be present because presence is all you have. That's why 1980s adults tend to be deeply loyal, quietly reliable, the kind of people who don't say much but always show up when it matters. Third, and this one is most important, the way they handle failure. In the 1980s, failure was not a big conversation. There were no participation trophies, no long discussions about how losing made you feel. You lost, you went home, you came back the next day and tried again. That sounds harsh, and sometimes it was. But what it built was a tolerance for failure that a lot of people today genuinely struggle with. The ability to try something, fall short, feel bad about it for a minute, and then keep going without needing someone to tell you it's okay. Now, here's the shadow side because there is one. A lot of people who grew up in the 1980s learned to suppress emotions without realizing it. Feelings were not really talked about. You pushed through, you moved on. Asking for help felt like admitting you couldn't handle something. And handling things yourself was the whole point. So many of them became adults who are incredibly strong on the outside but quietly overwhelmed on the side. They carry stress alone. They don't ask for support easily. They are more comfortable giving help than receiving it. And they sometimes struggles to understand why younger people need so much reassurance. Not because they are cold, but because nobody ever gave them that reassurance either. They didn't know it was an option. Is what nobody talks about when they talk about the 1980s generation. These people are quietly extraordinary, not in a loud way, not in a way that posts about it or builds a personal brand around it. Just in the way they live day after day without fanfare, without needing credit. They know how to be bored, and that sounds like nothing, but it's actually rare. They grew up without constant entertainment. Their imagination had to work, their brain had to create its own stimulation, and that quietly ability to sit with themselves, to think, to reflect, to just be, is something a lot of people today have completely lost. They know how to work, not perform working, actually work. They learned early that results come from effort and that effort is not optional. That's not something that goes away. It becomes the foundation of everything they build. They know how to lose. They have been disappointed by things they worked hard for. They have watched plans fall apart. They have learned the hard way more than once that life doesn't always reward the people who deserve it. And instead of breaking, they adjusted. They kept going because that's why you did. And here's the thing about all of that. In a world what is moving faster than ever, where everything is instant, where intentions spans are shrinking, where people change jobs every 2 years and relationship feel disposable, the psychology that the 1980s build is not outdated. It's needed more than ever. The ability to delay gratification, to fix things instead of replacing them, to show up without being reminded, to care about quality over speed, to build something slowly and trust the process. That's not old fashioned, that's rare. But here's what 1980s adults need to hear: the strength you build, the independence, the resilience, the ability to handle everything alone, it served you, it protects you, It got you here. But it was also built in a time when asking for help was not really allowed, when emotions were inconvenient, when vulnerability felt dangerous. And you are allowed to put some of that down now. You are allowed to ask for help without it meaning you failed. You are allowed to feel overwhelmed without pushing it away. You are allowed to need people, real, genuine, emotional support from people who love you without it making you weak. Because the strongest thing you can do now is not what you did at 8 years old alone in an empty house. The strongest thing you can do now is let people in. So if you grew up in 1980s, this video is for you. You are not outdated. You are not too rigid. You are not stuck in the past. You are the product of decade that asked the children and you delivered quietly without complaint, without recognition, and that shaped you into something this world still needs. Don't apologize for how you were built. Understand it, own it, and where it is holding you back, let it go. Tell me in the comments, did you grow up in the 1980s? What's the one thing from that time that still lives in you today? And if this one hit home, the next video is going to show you exactly why 1980s kids see the modern world differently from everyone else, and that why gap is growing every single year. Click it, you grew up figuring things out on your own way. This one you won't have to.